All right, what is up, and welcome back to the Build a Better You podcast. I'm your host, Austin Chan, and in today's solo episode, I go over how to spot the BS versus real info in the fitness industry. And so, we're going to be going over 5 red flags you should be aware of. Obviously, this is not an all inclusive list. There are definitely a lot more red flags I can go into, but I wanted to keep it short and sweet. And these are definitely like the first 5 that came to my head, and by far are kind of like the biggest filters, if you will, in terms of trying to filter out whether someone's info that you find on the internet is real or BS. And this is going to be perfectly timed. I think this episode is going to drop right after New Year's. So yeah, it's going to be perfectly timed, just in time for the New Year's, especially if you are someone who's looking to set a New Year's resolution and wants to start getting after your goals with the New Year coming around. And on your journey, you might find that you are just looking through a ton of information. There's just a ton of information out there, and you're just doing your own research and wanting to better yourself. And obviously, because there's so much information out there, you don't know where to start, or you don't know what's real, where to start. Like, if the information you're getting, is it going to help you get to your goals, or are you just kind of wasting your time, wasting your money, and you're not going to see any results? So yeah, hopefully this podcast will help. And then, just as a plug, with the New Year's around, if you are looking to lose fat, build muscle, and you need extra help and accountability to do so, and you want someone to give you the most effective and efficient program possible, then hit me up for online coaching. I will leave a link in the show notes. Go ahead and apply if you are looking for some help, one-on-one help from me personally. I will be taking on new online coaching clients for the month of January, just in time for the New Year's. So yeah, but without further ado, let's get into the topic of this podcast. So, how to spot the BS versus real info. Red flag number 1 is going to be they promise quick results in a short period of time. So, obviously, most of the fitness marketing BS that you'll find out there, it's going to be something along the lines of, build like 10 pounds of muscle in like 2 months, or build or lose a bunch of fat in like 20 pounds of fat in like 20 days, or some sort of ridiculous number that sets you up for unrealistic expectations, or something that sounds way too grand or way too good to be true. It's typically like a good rule of thumb that I say all the time is that if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. And this does apply to fitness as well, because yeah, if they promise something that sounds too good to be true, then it obviously is. You're definitely not going to be able to get those results. And the unfortunate truth is that even if you do get those results super quickly, it'll probably lead to unsustainable habits, or you'll have to take such a drastic and unsustainable approach that you can't really sustain those results. And it's like, what's the point of getting results if you can't keep those results for the rest of your life? And yeah, and sometimes even through personal experience, from what I've heard from previous clients, is that sometimes these people they get the results, but also it leaves them with a very poor relationship with food, or it leaves them with even worse off. They'll have eating disorders because of all these reckless and unsustainable habits that were taught by them, because they probably didn't know any better when they were first getting into the industry and looking for help. And whoever they stumbled upon gave them some stupid plan of super restrictive, super low calorie diet, or telling them that they can't eat this or they can't eat that, because if they want the results, then they should stay away or only eat a certain type of food or only do a certain type of exercise. And this leads them to have a very poor relationship with exercise, with food. And for some people, this can even lead to eating disorders, which literally takes a long time to unravel, especially if it forms into some kind of long-term habit or long-term psychological problem. So yeah, this is just really sad and unfortunate to see. So yeah, with that said, point number 1, if they promise quick results in a short period of time, it's most likely BS. And even if it's not BS, it's probably true. You can get those quick results, but at what cost are those quick results? Is it worth developing an eating disorder? Is it worth setting yourself back so many weeks or months of hard work just to get results that you're not able to sustain? You got to think, is it really worth it? Because oftentimes you know, when we do take the fast track or when we do take the rapid approach, it often leads us like down the road, like all the time, all the potential time and money we save, like it's gonna find its way back into your life somehow. Like you're always gonna have to pay back the dues in a way. Like you're never just gonna get a free ride, get those results and like be able to like sustain it. And even then, like maybe there's a small percentage of you that can do that, but for the most part, like myself included, like the fast rapid approach never worked for me. So yeah, you're always gonna have to pay the dues back in some way or another. So I would say don't even try it, because you're gonna end up like, when you think that, oh, I'm just gonna save more time with having to diet for a shorter amount of time, the time you technically save, you're gonna have to pay back later, because if you form those poor relationships, if you form those poor habits, you're gonna have to spend more time later on to kind of unravel those things or like fix those things. Whereas if you just took the slow and sustainable route from the start, you might have actually saved yourself some time more in the long run. So yeah, with that said, like I think just us as humans, we suck at thinking long term. Like if we think about this in terms of like, climate change, overpopulation, just like a lot of these issues, I don't want to get too much into this, but if we just think of a lot of these like modern issues we have with society, just we suck at looking at the long-term picture. Like all these companies, all of us, we make these decisions that only benefit us in the short term, whether that's like losing weight super fast or getting money super quickly, or yeah. And that's basically like the big two, losing weight quickly or getting a lot of money quickly. We don't think about like the dire consequences that this might have later on. Like we can do like a fast, quick like cash grab, like especially a lot of companies do. They just do that, and then they know that their business model isn't going to work for the long term. They know that their business is eventually going to go under, but they don't think about that. They just think about, how can I generate the most revenue right now? And I don't care about my business model. I don't care about what this business is going to look like in a span of like 5-10 years. I just want to know how much money can I make today, within the next week, within the next month, even within the next like first year. And yeah, it's just they don't think about the unsustainable process, and it directly translates to so many other things in life. And especially when we talk about the realm of health and fitness, people like only think about this in the short term. They think about, how much weight can I lose within the next few weeks? How much muscle can I put on within the next few weeks or a few months? They don't think, oh, I need to do this habit change, or I need to put this into practice for the next like 3 to 5 years, which I recommend is like a pretty realistic timeline if you want to achieve like your so-called dream physique, or anywhere close to, pretty much your dream. I say like 3 to 5 years of very consistent hard work, and you'll get pretty damn close to your your true goals or your true dream physique. Like I think that's like reasonable, and that's put in that much work, and then consider maybe some people might consider like performance enhancing drugs, or just taking more like extreme drastic measures. I say like have all the basics in place, do it for 3 to 5 years. Like once you figure that out, do it for 3 to 5 years consistently, and then see if you need to change like anything down the road in terms of like adding any enhancements or etc etc. But yeah, I don't want to get too much in that. So yeah, that covers it for point number 1. Don't fall for the quick results in a short period of time, no matter how I know that it's very tempting, just because we are very short attention span creatures. We like the fast results. We like to see things quickly. We don't like to focus on the longer term picture. And yeah, so yeah, that covers it for point number 1. Number 2, they say that their way is the quote best way. So obviously in the realm of fitness and nutrition, there isn't really no best way. So like stay wary of these people who use like absolutes, like this way is the best way, or these things are the worst for you, in terms of whether it's like a specific type of diet, or specific types of food, or specific training style, or specific exercises, because really there is no best or worst. Just because we are all like slightly different in a sense. Like obviously we do have certain principles in place that we want to keep consistent. For example, calorie deficit, energy balance, although that's not really like calorie deficit isn't really a diet in itself. It's just basically the concept of energy balance. Energy in, energy out. You take in less energy than your body needs, then you're gonna like lose body mass. You take in more, then you're gonna gain body mass just because of simple energy balance, simple thermodynamics. So with that in mind, like that stuff stays consistent just because it's like literally a law of thermodynamics and physics. Progressive overload is also another property that or another principle that doesn't really change. If we apply progressive tension or progressive load onto our muscles, onto our body is going to eventually adapt to that. And if you want your body to keep growing, to strengthen, to adapt, to better itself in one way, then you need to supply a specific demand to the body so that it triggers an adaptation response in order to respond to said stimulus or signaling. So we have those principles in place, but like everyone's approach to those principles may look slightly different. For example, one person might like a very efficient approach. They might like doing 1 or 2 sets very close to failure, or even to failure just to see the results, and they don't want to spend a lot of time in the gym. Meanwhile, some people like don't like pushing themselves to that point of discomfort, and they just might they might add more sets. They might do 3 or 4. They just like the higher volume approach. In terms of the calorie deficit, some people like low carbs as much as we like to shit on low carbs. Like, I am not against low carb. I just don't think that it is the optimal approach, nor is it the best approach, because especially if your goal is to build muscle, you need a significant amount of carbs. So there is really no best way. Like, going back to what I said, some people just function better with low carbs. Some people function better with lower fats. And that's just the simple truth. So there really is no best way. You can't really say like one way, you have to do this the one way or you won't see any results, or like this is the absolute best way and this applies to everyone and everyone needs to do this. And so a huge red flag in terms of like people who say that this way is the best way, if they're not directly saying that themselves, sometimes it's a very huge telltale sign when their name or handle or some sort of part of their business or part of their brand, part of their personality is sort of mixed in or ingrained with like one certain type of approach. So for example, you have people who are like, oh, I'm carnivore Keith, or I'm keto Karen, or I'm fasting Frank. They have like some sort of specific diet or some sort of specific like training style within their name, and it's like this is the only thing. And if you take a look at their content, this is the only thing that they perpetuate. This is the only thing that they ever talk about, and they always say this is the best way. Every other way is BS. You should not be doing this. You should not be doing that. You should be only to be doing this. That's just simply not true. Everyone is gonna find a different, like a slightly different approach. Again, approach is the key word here. Everyone's gonna find a slightly different approach to meeting these principles that we have in place for specific like adaptations or for a specific result. Like obviously, you meet calorie requirements, you meet protein requirements, and that's pretty much it in terms of trying to like lose fat and energy balance. And obviously trying to build muscle, we want some type of progressive overload, and it doesn't matter if someone does high volume or low volume. It's just we need these simple principles in place. As long as they're training pretty close to failure, they get enough of those like effective hard reps, and that's basically it. Like once they cover their bases, they're good to go. But everyone's approach is going to look slightly different. Some people might like eating a more healthful diet. They might like more like salads or whatever, or where some people might want to be a bit more loose with their nutrition. As long as they hit those calories, they hit those protein requirements, they're good to go. This is like the same thing as like certain people liking certain foods. Like for example, like some people might like cheese, for example. It's like that's not the healthiest thing. But if this allows this person to stick to their diet, if they add a good amount of cheese into their diet, then it's like, why the hell not? It's like, don't demonize like one thing and say that one person has to follow these strict specific rules. Actually, now that I think about it, that's actually kind of a poor example. But yeah, people who like, you know, it's like I just need to have diet soda in my diet. And even though there has been countless research to show that there's nothing wrong with diet soda, but if this person, like, drinking diet soda might not be the healthiest thing, like people just always want to argue that, like, oh, but water is better, or just drink fucking water. It's like, obviously we all fucking know that. So that's fucking obvious. Like, telling people to drink water, it's like, yeah, that's the most obvious fucking thing in the world. I've never heard that one before. That's very creative. So yeah, yeah, but yeah, in terms of that, like, diet soda, like, it might not be the healthiest thing compared to water, but if drinking diet soda allows person A to lose 100 pounds and stick to their diet because they didn't have to cut out soda or any sort of sweet drinks completely, then that is an absolute win in itself. Like, even though it might not be the healthiest thing, it is still healthier for them to lose 100 pounds of fat versus the person who's like, oh, I just want to be healthy, I just want to stick to, quote, natural sources. I just want to drink, like, sugar full, like, soda, and I don't want to stick to that, like, artificial sweetener stuff, but they didn't lose any weight. And this is just, like, the simple fact. It's like we could pay attention to this small, like, maybe this is, like, has health risk to it about, like, consuming artificial sweeteners, which it doesn't. But or we could say that, like, this person is, like, literally obese, and if they lost a ton of fat, they would have drastically improved health markers and an overall better quality of life. So it's like you got to weigh out the pros and cons of this. So yeah, that was quite the tangent. But yeah, if someone says that their way is the best way, or if they only have, like, one way that they constantly push, then they're more likely trying to sell you some certain thing. But yeah, don't pay attention to that. Everyone's approach is going to be slightly different. And again, do want to emphasize that although we have certain principles that we all need to follow, like energy balance, high protein intake for muscle building, muscle retention, to have satiation, and progressive overload in order to build muscle, and training close to failure to build muscle. But it's about everyone's approach is going to be slightly different, and your way of approaching those principles might look different from other people approaching those same principles. But those are going to be the foundational principles that you need to follow if you want to get a certain result out of your training or exercise program. So yeah, that covers point number 2. And then on to point number 3, they make everything sound overcomplicated and complex. So this is going to be a red flag, mainly because for the most part, like, you may have been misled to believe that somehow fitness and health is complicated. And although I'm not going to say that it's, like, super simple where, like, you don't really need to do much and it's just, like, these, like, few things, but I am also going to say that it is a lot simpler than a lot of people make it out to be. So, like, obviously, if we dive into, like, the minutiae, so let's kind of start from, like, a big view into kind of like a more microscopic view. So with the big view, if we think about it, like, it's not that complicated. You just need to strength train 3 to 4 times a week of hard strength training, mind you, like, not just going in and getting a pump or lifting the 5-pound weights for a few reps, but progressively hard strength training, and you're going to improve your body composition, improve your bone density, and all those benefits that you hear again and again, blah blah blah. But yeah, as far as that goes, strength training 3 to 4 times a week, hit all of your muscle groups, make sure that you're progressing and training pretty close to failure, which means you're training pretty hard to the point that, like, it's pretty much uncomfortable, and you basically want to be pushing to that point consistently. And then on top of that, we want a diet consisting of mostly nutritious foods. And this is for obvious reasons. You want all the micronutrients, you want all the healthful nutrients that come with, like, fruits, veggies, lean proteins, basically healthy sources of food versus, like, so-called empty calories, like, highly processed foods that you find in, those random junk food grocery aisles. So yeah, and then you also want some sort of flexibility in your diet, just because it's unrealistic to tell yourself that you're never going to have these foods again, just because we're in today's society, we're just so surrounded by it. And that's not to say that you need these foods to, like, per se, but it's just sort of to fit into today's society, because you're not going to walk around and like never see an Oreo unless you decide to live in like the middle of nowhere or live in the middle of the woods. But yeah, like you're always going to see those to some extent. Like society, that's just part of society nowadays. So it's just hard to tell yourself to like, I'm going to completely cut this out when you're going to be constantly exposed to it. So you might as well learn how to kind of manage that into your diet, and yeah, learn moderation and learn balance in terms of that. So yeah. And then as far as that goes, always be aware of calories in, calories out. You can because you can have all those nutritious things, but if you don't keep your calories in check, you're going to gain weight, you're going to lose weight, blah blah blah. Just because it really does boil down to energy balance. But that's not to say that that's the only thing that matters. Again, we want to combine that with having relatively good food choices. And then on top of that, that covers diet. We want like daily activity in terms of, we have the strength training portion. We also need the cardio portion. So some sort of daily activity. I recommend for, like, I do this myself, and I recommend this a lot for my clients. A lot of my clients just literally track steps and we're like good to go. Like just having some sort of daily activity where you're moving your body consistently. You know, I would usually want to say at least like 20 to 30 minutes like per session or a day. Start from there, and then, you know, increase it obviously as needed for your goals. But yeah, covering that like strength training, cardio / movement, mainly a nutritious diet, and paying attention to energy balance, and obviously like protein intake. That I think that kind of like gets lumped in with like the nutritious food sources. But it's like, yeah, once you just have those basics, you're pretty much good to go. And like, yeah, on paper that's literally like 4 things. So you don't need like all these like fancy diets or these fancy exercises or whatever have you, like people want to market or whatever. It's just literally keeping these 4 things in check, and you're going to be good to go, and you're going to be pretty like above average fitness and health levels compared to, you know, the current state of the average part of the population right now. So yeah, like that's pretty much it. But the thing that's complicated about it is like once you sort of dive into this a little bit, then you're like, oh my God, I have so many questions. Like, you know, what exercises should I do? Like, how should I be training? How should I order these exercises? It's just, once you dive into the specifics, then it gets a little bit more complicated. But I do want to say, like, on the surface level, if you do these things, you're going to be pretty well off. It's just that if you say you want to make your physique look a certain way, or if you just want to get to a certain strength level, or if you want to take things to kind of like the next level, then you kind of have to be a bit more intentional and a bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Not really meticulous, but you just have to be a bit more calculated about your approach. You need to learn about these little nuances in order to take things like a certain way. So yeah, but as far as like fitness itself, it is not overcomplicated or complex at all. So this kind of going back to my original point, like people who try to make it overcomplicated or more than likely just trying to sell you a solution. Because if they can make this fitness thing sound really complicated and like something that you really don't want to figure out, or something that like, yeah, that just sounds like really daunting and overwhelming, then you're less likely going to be able to do it. And you're more likely going to be like, okay, I'm just going to pay this person to have them figure everything out for me. And like, obviously, you know, part of the coaching process is that like I do help you figure everything out, but also I try to keep things as simple as possible. Like I'm never going to talk above you. Like, I mean, for example, like all the information that I put out now, it's like literally for free. I try to break everything down as simple as possible so that you know exactly what to do if you want to do it. But yeah, I try to make everything as simple as possible. Like, obviously, we can dive into nuances. Like, obviously, I can be talking over everybody's heads, but I prefer not to do that. I prefer to communicate you at a level that you can understand and hopefully learn from, because ultimately, that's my goal, is to educate you, and it's not really for me to, like, sell anything in specific. Obviously, it'd be great that, like, 50, like, plus people just signed up with coaching with me today, but, like, obviously that's not the end goal that I'm trying to shoot towards. I'm just trying to educate people, and then, you know, if people want to work with me, then they want to work with me. But yeah, I mean, I just love my job, so I just put everything out for free, and I just try to educate you as much as possible. So yeah, with that said, be sure to leave a 5-star review on if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. It definitely helps the podcast out. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next point. Um, so if what they're saying is going against the grain of the community, so a lot of this is usually has to do with the shiny object syndrome. So for a lot of us, when we hear something new, when we hear something that is like that goes against what everyone else says, we think this is the new thing, and it's often this fallacy that if something is new, then it automatically means that that thing is going to be better, which we know for a fact that this isn't always necessarily true, because new things come up all the time and they might not be the best. Sometimes the things in place are the reason why they're in place, is because they are tried and true things that have worked and stood against the test of time, and so they continue to work, and which is why we continue to do them. Like, for example, languages that we speak every single day, we use it because it continues to work. Like, obviously we could invent new languages that are more efficient and whatever, but things are in place for a reason. We speak to our children, we speak to our offspring, like in the same languages that we speak, just for the simplicity of it, just to pass on this tradition. And yeah, just because things are currently working, and it's like, why would you fix things when they aren't broken? So yeah, if someone says something that goes against like the weight of the evidence, and that's not to say that you should discount everything that's new. Like, obviously new things can be innovative, they can be like game changing. Like, for example, the internet, like people like were writing off the internet. People were writing off laptops at a point and like saying like, oh, this stuff is never gonna work out, this stuff is just a fad. Meanwhile, like modern time, like everyone's using laptops, everyone's using the internet. The internet is basically ingrained into our lives. Like, if you don't have Wi-Fi or internet access at home, you're basically living in a cave. So yeah, don't necessarily discount anything that sounds new, but also be wary of it. Like, what this person saying, like, is it backed by science, or are they just making some shit up just to like sound new, or yeah, just to make things like look new? Like, so this is why you have to be like something to be aware of, and this happens a lot in the fitness industry, especially within the exercise realm. Like, a lot of people just come up with these BS new looking exercises that like feel different or look a lot different, and people just follow them blindly just because they are new and they possibly provide people a different sensation. Meanwhile, these exercises are less effective than the current ones that like a lot of people preach, or even they are literally causing people injury down the road because they don't know any better about the mechanics of the movement, and they're just simply blindly following these people with huge followings, or look the way they look, and people just blindly follow them and do these exercises that they're promoting when they're ineffective, or even like possibly damaging. So always be aware that if something is new, just like be on the lookout for it, but also just take everything with a grain of salt. I'm not saying that like you should be applying these tips like with 100% like with like blindly following these tips that I'm following you. Like, don't just like take everything said literally. Like, obviously there is going to be some sort of nuance, and there is going to be you have to provide some kind of perspective to it. Like, don't just blindly follow my advice and just follow it every single word for word. Like, just know that I am a person with biases too. I say things a certain way because of certain experiences I've had. So yeah, but I try my best to be unbiased, but at the end of the day, no one is perfect. No one can be perfectly unbiased, because we are all humans with our own like events that have happened in our lives. We have our own experiences that shape the way we look and think about certain things. So yeah, with that being said, like, again, like, just because something is new, don't write it off completely, but also kind of look at it from the lens of like, is this am I thinking this is good just because it's new and no one's ever done this, or like, am I liking this because it actually has some merit to it and it's actually backed by science and something reliable? All right, so we are going to take a quick intermission, and just want to say thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and thank you so much for making it this far in this episode. And I want to take a quick break and introduce you to today's sponsor of the podcast, Legion Supplements. So first off, a few reasons why I decided to work with Legion. Legion really does take a 100% transparent and no BS approach to introducing its supplements. Rather than simply trying to sell you supplements under the notion of trust me bro, they actually aim to educate you about their products. If you go to their website, under every single product on their website, they list every single ingredient with their exact dosages, which means no proprietary blends, why they have chosen those specific ingredients and those specific dosages, and even the most up-to-date research to back everything up that they are claiming and saying. Legion's main priority is providing quality service and products. They believe in their service and products so much that if for any reason you're not satisfied, you can send them an email, fill out their form, and they will give you a full refund on the spot, no questions asked. And it's for these reasons alone why I think they are the best of the best, and why I have continued taking their products year after year, and why I've decided to work with them after they reached out. So yeah, they are just an awesome company all around. And if you're already taking supplements anyway, you're probably likely taking a multivitamin, fish oil, some sort of whey protein in some form. You likely want the best for your body, and I truly believe Legion is the best of the best. So go ahead and check out their products. They're such an awesome company. Be sure to use my discount code AC at checkout to save yourself 20% off your first order, and I'll leave the link to their website in the show notes below. But yeah, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening, and let's get back to this episode. And this actually ties into my next point, is that just because something is new, don't write it off completely. Rather, take a deeper dive and look into what type of person is posting this thing, because we want to look at a person's track record rather than looking at their other surface level measurements, their follower count, their physique, or maybe, and this is a very controversial one right now, or maybe someone who has doctor, and I put doctor in quotes, doctor in their title, because just these surface level measures aren't necessarily a good indicator as to whether someone is providing reliable information, because they could simply be very good looking, they could simply just have very good genetics, they could just simply be very charismatic by nature, and we know this time and time again. People who have all of these qualities are generally going to succeed better in life. Not necessarily because of their knowledge, not necessarily because of their experience levels. In fact, I know tons of coaches who, do the right thing, put out truthful information, put out evidence-based information, and by and large, these coaches don't do as well when you compare them to bigger names, people who are just naturally charismatic, who are naturally better looking, who just simply have who are more famous in a sense because of other things, not necessarily because of their knowledge base. Obviously, you have a few select people who kind of have it all, but by and large, people are not going to have it all. So we need to look at different measures, and it's just ultimately it comes down to I think you and us as the consumer to really call out this BS, because without our support, if we weren't liking these things, if we weren't following these people would not be getting the level of success that they are right now. So I think ultimately it comes down to us to educate ourselves the most in order to increase the sensitivity of our BS detectors, and ultimately for us to make these informed decisions in order to prevent misinformation and more spreading of the BS. But unfortunately, as humans are fallible. Like I said in the very beginning, we always want the quick fix. We always want to follow the thing that we want to hear. Most of us aren't good at accepting the harsh truth of telling ourselves, or even looking at the things that tell us that what we need to hear, and the things that we know that are better for us. We want to just hear the things that confirm our biases, or the things that sound the easiest to us. So I think, although as much as we want to blame these other people who are out there putting out BS and misinformation, we also need to realize that it is our job to be well informed and make these educated decisions, to not buy into the bullshit. So yeah, as far as that goes, rather than looking at surface level measures, went on a bit of a tangent, but rather than that, look at things like things that are more indicative to someone's knowledge base and experience levels. For example, how long have they been in the industry? Because, for example, if someone has been coaching for 5, 10 plus years, like that more than likely than not, that is not an accident. People who have been in the industry for that long, they're doing it for a purpose. They are doing it probably because they are passionate about it. Like, you don't dedicate 5 to 10 years of your life towards something that you don't really want to do. So how long they've been in the industry, although again, that's not the end all be all. We also have to look at other factors like how many people have they worked with. If this person has only worked with like their friends and family, or they're very close friends, or just like a handful of people, then we need to know, like, is what they're doing, is it repeatable? Because that's kind of one of the biggest indicators of BS, or if something is actually working. Like, it has to be repeatable over a large scale population. And this is something we see within like the scientific literature community. Like, this is why we want to look at like studies that have like randomized control trials, because if you take like a random sample size from a bunch of like different people, then you can be assured that you're getting a bunch of random people, and that whatever results the study shows, it likely applies to the large scale population, because like the large scale population, we're not all the same type of people. We all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different areas that have different factors that influence different things in our lives. So that's why we need like randomized control trials, or random like sample size from random people from different backgrounds. So yeah, how many people they have worked with. Also another thing, what type of people have they worked with? If, like, for example, this person only works with athletes, then their methods, their practices may not apply to you if you aren't like a professional athlete, because you're probably just the average person. Like, if we think about not even just genetics, like genetics aside, we think about lifestyle. An athlete literally dedicates their full-time job is their sport. So they can likely spend as much time as they want working out. They can spend as much time as they want towards their diet. They likely have on staff, nutritionists, trainers, people to assist with a part of their lives. Whereas, the average person like you don't have like a full staff of like 10 people to look after you. You probably have like kids to take care of. You have other family members to take care of. So yeah, it's like you just don't have the same resources or the same lifestyle in order to get the same results or similar results to people who just have completely different lifestyles and completely different circumstances than you. So we need to look at like what type of people this person works with, and that's not to say that you can't specialize in working with a specific type of population. For example, I know some coaches who only specialize working with athletes. Some people only specialize with working with mothers. Some people only specialize working with just a specific type of population. That's not to say you can't work with these specific types of population, but if we want to talk about in the context of like building muscle, losing fat, improving body composition, you just have to do your research and look into what type of people this coach like specifically works. If they do specialize, personally, I don't really specialize in anything just because like I don't feel the need to. But yeah, like if that, as far as that goes, like look into what type of people this person specializes to, and ask, are you that type of person? Like, are you like some people like to get really close, like really zoomed into this like niche or whatever, but like I'm not a huge fan of it personally. But yeah, some people like to like focus on like single mothers over 40 who make this certain amount of money and like live this certain certain lifestyle. Like, you have to really consider, like, am I part of this category? Because if not, if you are a single mother over the age of 40 with this specific lifestyle, like, you don't want to be choosing someone who works with like professional baseball players who have torn this specific ligament and like working with like this specific position on the field. So you want to be choosing someone who understands your struggles and who is able to provide like realistic and applicable solutions to your lifestyle and provide you with what you need. So yeah. But yeah, with that being said, that about covers everything I wanted to cover. So yeah, just as a quick kind of wrap up recap, we're gonna go over the 5 red flags again. So number 1 is gonna be if they promise you quick results in a short period of time, it is likely bullshit. And yeah, and even if it does work, it might lead to unsustainable results or bad consequences, like forming poor relationship with food that will literally carry on for you for years, from what I've heard from some people. Number 2, they say that their way is the quote best way, and as we know with fitness and nutrition, there is no best way. There are best practices, there are best principles to follow, but there is no best way or approach to go towards these principles. Number 3, they make everything sound overcomplicated and complex. And again, fitness and nutrition itself is not very complex. You just have to follow, like I said, a few basic principles. The hardest part is really finding your specific solution to them. Again, finding that specific approach that works for you, because like especially with like nutrition, all of us have some sort of emotional relationship with like food in a sense, and we sort of just have to find our way to navigate around that in order for us to kind of best meet our goals and also fulfill those emotional relationship needs. But yeah. Fitness is easy. Fitness is simple, not easy. And I do want to make that clear. Simple just means that there's not a lot to figure out. You just have to follow these basics, but it's not easy in the sense that like it's not easy to do. Like staying consistent over the course of months and years is not easy. Dragging your ass to the gym when you don't feel like it is not easy. Telling yourself to stick with your nutrition and fitness when you have a family to take care of and when you have so many other priorities in your life, that is certainly not easy. But it is simple. You just have to follow these things over and over again in order to get those results. Okay, on to number 4. What they're saying goes against the grain of the community. And again, like just because something is new, don't write it off completely, but also look at it with a grain of salt, because just because something new is new does not mean you should be doing it or that it's like the next best thing or whatever. Science honestly hasn't changed all that much over the course of the past few decades. Like there may be some like emerging stuff that has come up over the past like 10 years, but for the most part, like the foundational basics, like I said, like a calorie deficit, energy balance, I don't think it's ever going to change unless somehow the laws of thermodynamics change, progressive overload, unless our body somehow evolves to like a different thing. Like progressive overload is still going to come into play. You still need an adequate stimulus for your body in order to signal all the adaptations and everything. So yeah, keeping in mind that these foundational basics aren't going to change all that much, if at all, over the course of the next forever. So yeah, look at new things with a grain of salt, but don't write them off completely. And then lastly, number 5, look at people's track records, look at the coaches, look at the fitness influencers. I don't like that term, but yeah, look at the fitness professionals in kind of your realm, in your space. Look at them much deeper rather than just like simply surface level measures, like how big their follower count is, what their physique looks like, or even what their title looks like, because that doesn't tell the whole story. Someone who specializes in like kidney disease isn't all of a sudden like someone who is like a specialist in nutrition or training and exercise. Like you have to look at their relevant title and field and how that kind of relates to the information that they are putting out or that they're delivering to you. So yeah, instead look at things like how long they have been in the industry, because someone who has been in the industry for a long time doesn't really get there by accident. They're likely very passionate about what they do, or they are really good at doing it, so they just have been in the industry for a long time. Number 2, how many people have they worked with? Again, we don't want a small sample size. We want someone who has worked with a lot of people, who has had a lot of experiences, because again, like experience means more practice, and practice makes progress. Practice kind of makes perfect. I don't really like that term because no one's really perfect, but you get the point. Practice like gets people closer to perfect. So the more practice someone has had, they might be better at that thing. Like most likely they'll be like better at that thing. And then lastly, what type of people have they worked with? Look at someone who has worked with people who are similar to you in your certain situation. Don't look at them and just like, oh, they train athletes for a living, and yeah, I'm a single parent who has 2 kids to take care of, and I have a very busy lifestyle, so I'm gonna work with them. So meanwhile, like, their approach is for people who literally like do sports for a living. Meanwhile, you have so many other priorities on your plate. So yeah, that's something to something important to look into in terms of their clientele. But yeah, that about covers all of the 5 red flags that I wanted to cover. Thank you so much for listening. And again, I am taking new online coaching clients for the month of January. So hit the link in my show notes to apply if you need extra help losing muscle, building fat, and trying to do it the most effective and most efficient way possible. But thank you so much for listening. Be sure to leave a 5-star review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to leave a written review if you have certain topics that you really enjoyed listening to, or if you want to hear certain other topics from me. But yeah, that about wraps up for this episode. Thank you so much for listening again, and I will catch you in the next one.